In this video, I'll explain how to get all factor levels of a factor vector or a factor data frame column. So without too much talk, let's dive into the R code. So in the video, I will show you several examples, and the first example is based on the factor vector that we can create with line 2 of the code. So if you run this line of code, you can see at the top right of RStudio that a new vector object is appearing, which is called vec. And we can print this factor vector to the bottom in the RStudio console by running line 3 of the code. And then you can see that our factor vector contains several factor elements. And you can also see the levels of our factor vector. However, if we want to return only the levels of our factor vector, then we can apply the code that you can see in line 5. And in this line of code, I'm applying the levels function to our vector object. So if you run line 5 of the code, you can see at the bottom that the factor levels of our vector are returned as character strings. So in this first example, I have explained how to return the levels of a factor vector. However, it's also possible to return the factor levels of data frame columns. And in the next example, I'll show you how to do that. So as first step, we need to create a data frame that we can use in the examples later on. So in order to create this data frame, we have to run lines 7 to 9 of the code. So if you run these lines of code, you can see at the top right of RStudio that a new data frame object is appearing, which is called data. And if you click on this data frame, you can see that we have created a data frame with 5 rows and 3 columns, x1, x2, and x3. And each of these columns contains different factor levels. Let's assume that we want to return the levels of only one of the columns of the column x1 as character strings. Then we can apply the code that you can see in line 11. And in this line, I'm again using the levels function as I already did in the first example in line 5 of the code. However, this time I'm specifying within the levels function that I want to extract the levels of the column x1. And I'm doing that by specifying the name of the data frame. Then I'm specifying the dollar operator. And then I'm specifying the name of the column of which I want to return the factor levels. So if you run line 11 of the code, you can see at the bottom in the RStudio console that all the factor levels of this column are returned to the bottom in the RStudio console. So in this example, I have explained how to return the factor levels of only one variable. However, it's also possible to return the factor levels of all variables of a data frame. And this is what I want to show you in the next example in line 13 of the code. And in this line, I'm using the sapply function. And within the sapply function, I'm specifying the name of our data frame. And I'm also specifying the levels function. So if you run line 13 of the code, you can see at the bottom in the RStudio console that a list object has been returned. And each of these list elements corresponds to one of the columns of our data frame. So the first list element corresponds to the column x1. And as you can see in this list element, all levels of the factor in the column x1 are returned. In the second list element, the factor levels of the second column are returned. And in the third list element, the factor levels of the third column are returned. So in this video, I have explained how to return the factor levels of a factor vector or a factor column using the R programming language. However, in case you want to learn more on this topic, you could check out my homepage, statisticsglobe.com, because on my homepage I have recently published a tutorial in which I'm explaining the content of this video in some more detail, and I will put a link to this tutorial into the description of the video. Furthermore, if you have liked the video, I would be very happy if you leave me some positive feedback in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel to get notifications in future when I'm releasing new videos to the channel. That's it for this video. Thanks a lot. See you next time.